Hey, this is Tommy Gunn from Cracked Rabbit Gaming, and today I'm going to talk about how to use sprite characters in RPG Maker VX Ace. This is a really common question. People have all sorts of questions about how to format it, what size do the characters need to be, how do you tell RPG Maker what size your characters are, and things like that. So this isn't about tile sets, this is just about characters and event graphics. So first of all, let me show you where in the manual you can find it. So if you go to the guide in RPG Maker, you might think you should just right away go and search for graphics or something like that, but there's a lot of different things in the manual that talk about graphics, and a lot of that is about scripting and things. So where you want to go is just in this first one, RPG Maker Reference Manual or Resource Standards, because graphics are a resource. So as you can see up here, graphics, tile sets, skins, things like that. So right here is what you want. You can use PNG or JPEG files, but you should just use PNGs all the time. Why not? You don't care about saving a little bit of file size for a game like this. Just go for the highest quality PNG. So this does explain how it works, though it is not really that clear, and it's a lot easier if you just see it. So a character can be of any size, and a total of 12 patterns, 4 directions, down, left, right, up, times 3 patterns are arranged in the designated order. In each file, arrange characters 2 down and 4 across for a total of 8. The size of this character is calculated based on 1/12 the width and 1/8 the height of this file. And then it goes on to talk about using these other special characters, exclamation point and the $sign, which I'll get to in a little bit. So first of all, let's just look at what a character sheet looks like. So these are Mac characters. If you just go, these are the standard characters that come with the RTP in RPG Maker. So as you can see, these are 32 by 32 pixels each for each frame. And there's this really helpful little plugin for Photoshop that I highly recommend. It's called Guide Guide. You can get it at guideguide.me, and it lets you set guides basically like a grid. But the reason this is better than a grid is because you can do whatever size you want, and it makes it really easy to do. So like for this one, this is just 32 pixel tiles, which I've already done. So and I made these presets. You'll have to make presets yourself. So if I turn on the guidelines, you can see so it automatically puts these guides in. The thing that's great about using guides is that you can save guides in a file in Photoshop, whereas the actual grid, if you go to your preferences and you go to the grid, you can set it in many different ways, but it's always going to be square, which guide you can set whatever dimensions you want, and also it's universal across all your different files that you have open, so you'll have to change this every time. So if you have one file that's an icon set that's 24 pixels, and you have another one that's like a character sheet like this that's 32 pixels, you'll have to keep changing the guides or changing the grid if you're working on different files. And so then you can do subdivisions. Oops, yeah, you need one. So if I I'll turn off the guide and turn on the grid, and it might be really hard to see, especially because it's all gray. Let me put subdivisions back on. I'll do 2. So then now you've got these dotted lines in there. Anyway, you can change the color, but it's kind of hard to see, and the guides save with the file, so highly recommend that. So these are the RTP characters. These are the standard 32 by 32 pixels. And then you can also use Mac characters, which are basically 1.5 times the height, but still 32 width. So as you'll see, I don't know if that guide is distracting, but in both of these files, there are 4 sets across and then 2 2 up and down. So you have a total of 8 characters here, and then each character itself has 3 frames of animation for each direction the character's facing. So if you just look at one of these, you'll have them facing down, left, right, and up. And so this needs to be consistent. That's how it works. Of course, you can use animation in a different way, which they do with things like doors. But just for characters, let's stick with this. And so as you can see, these are different sizes, but it still works. And how does it do that? Well, because RPG Maker simply divides it up. It knows that it needs to be divisible by 12 across, 4 times 3, and so it just divides it that way, and then it divides it by 8 down, because there are 4 times 2. So it doesn't matter what size your characters are. As long as it's in this format, it will always import it correctly, and you actually don't need to use the import tool. You can just drag the file into the graphics, into the correct folder in your graphics folder. And then, so here's this special character. If you can see this, this has a $sign in front of it. And if we go back to the manual, adding a $sign to the beginning of the file name allows you to treat one character as one file. In this case, the size of the character will be 1/3 the width and 1/4 the height. So that's all that $sign means. It just means there's one character here, and now it'll just divide it by 3 across and 4 down. So let me show you. So there's no specific size. So as you can see, like, these grids are 32 pixels, and you can see you can pretty much just see the head of my characters in these boxes. But if we playtest the game, of course you'll see that it works fine. It shows the entire character. They overlap each other just as you would expect them to. So there's really no problem. If you have really big characters, you can get into some trouble with things overlapping incorrectly, so you might have to deal with that, but just for characters that are this big, you don't really have any issues. So there is that one other character that you can add, the exclamation point. And if you add that to the beginning, it cancels the application of the 4-pixel offset and also turns off the translucent effect applied by the bush attribute. This is used mainly for object type characters on maps such as doors and treasure chests. It can also be used in combination with the $sign. So what that means is, back to our playtest, so you see there's these bushes down here, and if I walk into it, it's kind of hard to see. I hope you're watching this in HD. The legs of the character are basically cut off here, so it gives the illusion of walking through these bushes, but really all it's doing is just cropping the character essentially. And I can demonstrate that by I'll demonstrate 2 things at once. So we'll make just to show you that you can use any size character. This is just a garbage image that I created with a red border around it that's 2 pixels and just a pattern in the middle. And here's how I would recommend creating, if you're going to create a new character. Oh, and by the way, of course, if you have multiple characters on a sheet, they have to all have the same size per frame. So even though this character here is smaller, it still just has empty space above it, and then that'll work fine. So obviously you just have to make sure that nothing's overlapping each other. So if you're using your grid lines or your guidelines, then you can easily see, maybe not on the video, but in real life, you can easily see that they're not overlapping each other and there's just a bunch of empty space above. So back to our test character. So this is a rather large image, and we're just going to pretend that this is a character. And so if you're going to make, say, a big monster or something, this is a pretty arbitrary size. This is 121 pixels by 121. So we'll start out with how big I want one frame to be. And then I will change the canvas size to percentage, so I can do 3 across and 4 down, so 300% width, 400% height, and that way I can be sure that it divides evenly and everything like that. So rather than start with one large sheet and then try to divide it, I'll just start with that. And then here I can show you, drag it over here and make sure you can see it. So the number of columns we want, or actually I'll do column width. Actually, wait, let's see if this works. So there you go. So you can do columns 3 by 4. That's an easy way of doing it. Or you can put the actual pixels in if you know that. So this is with guide, then you just hit the button and then boom, it generates the guides for you. So it's really quick, and then you can save that as a preset. So now we've got these guides. Of course, right now I'm just going to fill this whole, I already copied this as a pattern, so I'm just gonna fill the whole canvas with that pattern. All right, I've copied my garbage character across this image file, so now there's 3 across and 4 down, and they're all the same, so it's not going to animate in any meaningful way. And by the way, the way that animation works, if you don't know, if we look at a character like this, it goes back and basically zigzags, if you want to think of it that way. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. So it just zigzags back and forth. So the middle frame is always shown between the other two. So it doesn't, you can also get other scripts that will allow you to add more frames of animation if you want, and you can get animation that looks a lot better because the animation really doesn't look that great, but that's just the way it is default. Anyway, so back to this large character. So now I'm going to save it as a ping file, and I'll just save it here. And so here we have the ping file, and I'll drag it over into graphics characters. And remember, this is one single, well, I guess, yeah, whatever. We'll just do it. We know that this is one single character, so I'll add the $sign. Otherwise, it's going to divide it up too many times, and that will be confusing and won't look right. So now we can just, I'll add an event over here in this bush. And so as you can see, I didn't import it. All I did was drag it over, and now here it is in, at the top of my graphics with the red dot by it to indicate that it's imported. So of course, in this case, it doesn't matter which one I choose because they're all the same. So I'll just do that, and see, it's so big that it doesn't even fit in this graphics window here. So that can get a little confusing if you have really big objects and graphics. So we'll just hit OK, and again here we cannot see the whole thing, but we'll play test it. And there it is. So now you can see that the bottom of the character is a little bit, oh, and so because this is an object that we set to have the center be like player touch is the default, I think. So I can't run through, I'm trying to run up right now and I can't, but I can run through the sides of it. And as you can see, the way that animations, or sorry, not animations, but graphics are displayed, it's always anchored at the very bottom center. So like that's where the event is, and it starts the graphic right there and goes up and out. So the event itself will always be right here in the center at the bottom. So you can see that it does have that translucent effect on it. But if we go back just to show you, go to our test character and we'll put the exclamation point in. Not sure if it matters what order you do it in, but they have them with it at the front, so I'll just do it that way. Now I'm gonna have to choose it again because now it's gone. So there it is again. See, it updated right away. I didn't have to do anything. But if you run into any problems, of course, you can just close and open your project again and it should be there. So now let's play test. And now you can see that there's no translucent bottom on this rectangle, or this square actually, because of that exclamation point that we put in there. So, and so by the way, if you don't want your character to be able to run through this, that obviously could be a problem. If it's a stationary object like this, of course, you can just put more graphics in there behind it, especially since it's covering it up. You can just put something there like a rock or whatever, and it'll be covered up by this graphic. At least it should be. So you won't even see what's behind it, or you can use a clear graphic that you create. But if you want to animate like a big monster and you don't want to be able to run through it, like say this really is a solid object that's moving around, that can be an issue, and it's too bad that there's not really a solution to that. It gets kind of complicated. But anyway, so that's how these graphics work. So it's kind of nice because this way you don't ever have to tell RPG Maker like what size your files are, what the dimensions are, or anything. It just divides it up, and if you get characters from some other resource like these mat characters, then they'll just work automatically. One thing is if you do import here, if you import your characters through the resource manager, sometimes you might have, so as you can see, these files have these green backgrounds on them, and so if you import this, it lets you choose the background. So for some reason, maybe you'll have a file that has a different color in the background that's supposed to be transparent. So you can just left click on it, and so like if I click anywhere, you can see the color changes. So we just want to click on anywhere on the background to get that green color, and now it knows that that's supposed to be completely transparent. And then in this case, black is supposed to be translucent, so the shadows are black, but then because we're choosing that down here, it will make that translucent. But if you use black anywhere else in the images, like sometimes in the eyes, then those will also become translucent. So it's a little weird. And of course you can zoom in up here if you need to. So, but like I said, you don't actually have to do that. Usually you can just drag and drop the files into the folder and it should just have them there. So that's about it for characters. Just remember that that's the format you need. It has to be 4 characters across and 2 down, and then each character has to be in this format. And oh, and actually, so I'll show you. That's not a good example. Let's add a door here. And so as you can see, these doors, they have the same animation all the way across. So if they're animated, they don't do anything. And the animation clearly is up and down, so that's a little strange. But the way that they do that, if you just look here at the way they do it, they set a move route, and then they have it turn left, wait 3 frames, turn right, wait, turn up, and then turn through on so you can walk through it. And that's how they animate it. And so in this way of doing graphics, you can change the timing of it because you can add these weights in. So that's one way of doing it. And so one other thing to point out about just animations is that you have these options down here. So if you turn on like stepping animation, even though this graphic, like I said, has the same thing all the way across, but if this were a person, okay, this is going to be really weird because it's a door. But anyway, I'll turn stepping animation on and just leave it where it is. And now you can see that he is just constantly walking because stepping animation is on. So it just continually animates back and forth that way. Actually, okay, just for fun, if I go and run into him, he spins around because it thinks it's a door. Obviously, that's all screwed up now. So, and then walking animation is when it's moving, it'll animate. But then when it's standing still, it won't animate. So that's just, the walking animation is the default for when you have characters. So like if I open up one of these characters, walking animation is on and his movement is set to random. So he just walks around on his own and animates when he's walking. So that's about it, I think, for graphics, at least for sprite characters. And don't forget about consulting the manual or just looking on forums because there's more information there. And I hope that helped. Please like and subscribe and visit crackedrabbitgaming.com for more stuff like this. Bye.